The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one by myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So I want to do something a little different this morning, in that I will talk a little bit, and then I want to read some passages from a scripture. I prepared this talk a month ago, initially, when we were coming up on the California primary elections. And the words from this scripture just really spoke to me as something very alive and refreshing, and as an alternative to all the political wrangling that was going on. It was helpful to hear the Buddha speaking and reminding us of what else is going on in the world that we might not see. I'll be reading passages from the scripture, the Great Wisdom, the Prajnaparamita scripture. And as it turns out, that's about wisdom, and today we did the festival of Manjusri, who's the embodiment of wisdom. So that seemed to fit together quite nicely. As you see, I've got a picture here of Prajnaparamita. She also represents wisdom, but more specifically, she represents the scripture of great wisdom, or those great wisdom scriptures. She's from a different system of iconography, but iconography, it doesn't really have systems. It arises from people's experience. And so it's not invented or designed. It's just this is how a person experienced great wisdom. Just like the face on our statue on the main altar that came to the sculptor in a dream. So he then knew how to make the face just right. And our experience just doesn't always fit logical, rational boxes or pigeonholes. Okay. I'll be reading from the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 lines, and I'll be reading from this book called Mother of the Buddhas. It's by Lex Hixon. He was a scholar and also but a practitioner. He practiced in a lot of different traditions, but he brings a certain devotional element to the scripture, which I think kind of fits very well with this statue of Prajnaparamita. To my mind, it's very Indian. You know, there's a sumptuousness to it, a devotional element to it, and it's not a literal translation. It's sort of an expansion or an elaboration on the scripture. The Prajnaparamita Sutra, it's actually a collection of 18 to 20 different scriptures in the Mahayana canon. And they vary in length, anywhere from one syllable to 100,000 lines, okay, and everywhere in between. It includes the scripture of great wisdom, which we do every day, every morning, as part of our morning service. It also includes the diamond scripture, which in the East is studied quite widely and also chanted or recited in the same way that we do the scripture of great wisdom. In one way, in all these scriptures, in all these different lines for each one, it's the same material kind of repeated over and over again. And it's like the scripture of great wisdom. The reason we do it every day is because it just somehow kind of burns deep into our mind, the teaching. So the scripture is intended for recitation or chanting. It's not like an intellectual document, and it's really not like what's called a Shasta or a commentary, but rather something for us to recite. It was probably oral in the beginning, passed down word of mouth. It was written, the They were written down around the 2nd century AD. They just appear in references in the historical record. When we talk about the historical record, that means that's the first time it appears in writing that we have a record of. It doesn't mean that it didn't exist before that. And probably it did, probably for a couple of centuries. But it just appears in Nagarjuna's writings. Nagarjuna is one of our ancestors, and he's said to have gone to the Naga palace beneath the waves, beneath the sea, to retrieve these scriptures. It said they were too deep for the people at the time of the Buddha, so the Buddha gave them to the Nagas to store up until people were ready to hear it. Okay? Reverend Master Ji told us that what that means is that they went deep into meditation to obtain these scriptures. They come from a place of practice and meditation. Prajna translates roughly as wisdom, but it's the practice of wisdom. We need a verb to wise because it's like wising. It's the activity of wisdom, and it's also it's not knowledge. It's a quality of perception, and it's seeing, perceiving, responding all in one unified response. It's like playing music. You see a note on the page and you immediately know what note to play on, like a violin or a piano. It's just this immediate sense of what needs to be done and what's good to do, and to see that all in one go. The fruit of prajna is shunyata, and that is what is often translated as emptiness or nothingness or the void. Reverend Master Ji said it's the fullest nothingness you'll ever bump into. This is the pure in the Scripture of Great Wisdom, the way we translate that. A recent translation of this Scripture of Great Wisdom translated as boundlessness. Okay? It's to give us, the Scripture is trying to get us to experience what that boundlessness is. It's deeper than a rational thought. Okay? And think of going down to the bottom of the sea, dropping down into the deepest core of one's being, and below the waves, often the waves represent the mind with all its churning and roiling and waving and activity. We're going down below that. And we want to try to listen with the heart mind. The Scripture is written and comes from the heart mind, so we want to listen with the same mind with which it is given. I believe in Tibetan Buddhism, they call this wisdom-seeking emptiness, or seeing emptiness. Okay? Again, it's not knowledge. There are a few words that are used in the Scripture in the translation that I think need commenting on, and perhaps would not be the ones I would choose. One is omniscience. It talks about great wisdom being omniscience, and that just simply means all-knowing. Okay? But it's pure knowing without a subject, but also without an object. It's just knowing. This is the equivalent of what Ajahn Chah in the forest tradition calls the one who knows. Okay. Sometimes described as pure awareness or pure presence. He also uses the word unthinkable, which basically means inconceivable, but he uses that word too. Reverend Master Ji used to tell us that there was a translation of the rules for meditation that, in a translation that said, think the unthinkable. And she was making the point that this doesn't make sense. One can't think the unthinkable. And the way she translated it was neither trying to think nor trying not to think. Okay, that's the wisdom that we're trying to see with. The scripture of great wisdom calls it the deepest wisdom of the heart. That is beyond discriminative thought. Prajnaparamita is called the mother of Buddhas because it's through the practice of prajna that we give birth to enlightenment or awakenedness or Buddhahood. Prajna translates roughly as insight, and it's the insight half of serene reflection meditation. Okay? It's the reflection part of our practice. It's also the sense that by nourishing the child, with a capital C, in our hara, we're nourishing wisdom in the birth of enlightenment in our womb. So there's, again, the sense of Prajnaparamita is the mother of Buddhas. She's what gives rise to Buddhas. Through meditation and practice, we give birth to Buddha. We give rise to our own certainty of the Buddha nature. The central teaching of the Prajnaparamita scripture is no separate self. Okay? No separate existence, no separate thing. Some of us have been studying the Diamond Sutra. This term and the translation we're using says no lakshana. No lakshana of self, no lakshana of human being, no lakshana of sentient being, no lakshana of soul. Okay? There's nothing concrete or fundamental that is separate from anything else. The Buddhist word for that we usually use is anatta, okay, which is made up of two words. In Indian religion there was the Atma, which was kind of the great oversoul, if you will, and then there was, everyone had an individual soul. And Atma was the oversoul, and when you put an A in front of it, it's like a negative word. We have something like we use that in English, but can't remember offhand what it is. But anatta means no Atman, okay, no separate self. The wonder of that is that if there is no separate self, there's no division into anything. We're not dividing up reality into little pieces. If there's no division, all is one. And if all is one, everything is Buddha nature. There's nothing outside of Buddha nature. There's simply Buddha nature. And therefore it deserves our respect. Everything deserves our compassion, our kindness, our respect, our reverence. Okay? And this is also how wisdom gives rise to compassion. Because everything is a part of us. Because we're all a part of this one unified awareness, how could we not be compassionate to other parts of it? Okay, we want to treat everything as if it were as cherished as our own self. Because in truth, we're all connected. We study this in particular in our tradition, in Soto Zen, in the Sandokai, which is one of our morning office scriptures. And we talk about the all is one and the all is different. This is sometimes what's called absolute truth and relative truth. All is one is this unity, but at the same time, everything is different. All is different and all is one. The all is one is developed through meditation. The all is different can be cultivated through the precepts, because it's about compassion. So it's wisdom and compassion coming together. And as Reverend Master Jiu said, when you see the all is one and the all is different as one, when you can see that simultaneously, that's what enlightenment is. Okay, these two qualities. So I'm just going to read you a few passages. Prajnaparamita, the word itself, prajna, we've talked about that. Paramita is a word that translates literally as crossing to the other shore. Okay. And that's a clue that we're not talking about ordinary wisdom. We're talking about the wisdom that crosses beings to the other shore. And it's connected specifically with the bodhisattva path. So by just the title itself, Prajnaparamita, we know it's about bodhisattva practice. Okay? And there's kind of two themes. One is that it exists, okay? It's the unborn, undying, unchanging, uncreated. We see that, we realize that through wisdom, but we also have to realize it. It's an injunction. The scriptures continually pointing that we have to practice this. It's not enough to just sit on our cushion. We have to get out and practice it in the everyday world. We have to cultivate compassion for everything. And in the passages I'll read, you'll hear this going back and forth between, there's awareness, but then there's compassion. There's awareness, and then there's what he calls liberative activity, okay, which is the translation of skill and means, okay, compassion and wisdom. So this is a chapter called Incomparable and Measureless Joy. Again, he's using all these different words to try to help us let go of our limited view of reality and open this up to this infinity that is the Buddha nature. Lord Buddha is speaking. Fervently dedicated to the enlightenment of every conscious being, the bodhisattva contemplates the expanse of manifestation, extending beginninglessly and infinitely in every direction and through every dimension. Ceaselessly, the diamond being, that's the bodhisattva, the diamond being contemplates world systems beyond this planetary system, an expanse of inhabited worlds immeasurable in extent, beyond reckoning and number, inconceivable in their essential nature, infinite in the complexity of their life forms, and limitless in the subtlety of their civilizations. The bodhisattva observes the range of past eons in each of these world systems, envisioning the Buddhas, or fully awakened ones, who have appeared there wisely to guide and tenderly to mature conscious beings. We would often say sentient beings instead of conscious being, but they're synonyms. They mean the same thing. Buddha's immeasurable in spiritual stature, beyond reckoning and number, inconceivable in essential nature, infinitely powerful in liberative art, and boundless in transcendent insight. Adamantine awareness flawlessly visualizes these ancient Buddhas at the moment when they blissfully enter final nirvana. Beginning at this point, the chapter is a meditation on Prajnaparamita. It's a directed meditation. So they're trying to get us to open up further and further and further. Okay? This final nirvana, the state of absolutely fulfillment, which leaves behind no trace of the suffering of any being. Perceiving how their tracks suddenly cease, how their path instantly disappears, how their obstacles and the obstacles of all beings in their Buddha fields utterly dissolve. It's another way of saying that the bodhisattva leaves nobody behind. Okay, the bodhisattva trains for the sake of others as well as oneself. And the classic lines, as we know from our renewal of vows ceremony, when we take the bodhisattva vow, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Okay? The bodhisattva now contemplates with jubilation the marvelous process by which these ancient Buddhas were guided to the final goal of evolution, where tears for themselves and for others disappeared forever, where inner blockages and outer obstacles were broken through forever, where personal burdens and those of others were laid down forever, where even their highly developed sense of perpetual change and the suffering of sentient beings involved in change was extinguished, and their altruistic thoughts were released entirely, their minds having become the highest perfection of harmony, diamond persistence, and pure presence. Now he's going to expand that. The meditator now carefully appreciates the long careers of these Buddhas, beginning from the moment when they first generated the clear conviction that enlightenment for the sake of all beings is possible, committing themselves to this possibility and continuing to struggle for the sake of others through innumerable lifetimes until they attained enlightenment and blissfully entered nirvana. The bodhisattva surveys and considers with ecstatic awe the deep reservoir of transferable meritorious energy, merit. Transferable meritorious energy accumulated along their way by these fully awakened ones through their practice of the 6 transcendent perfections. Perfection is a word that's often used to indicate the paramitas. You often will hear that use 6 perfections or 10 perfections. So he lists the 6 perfections, or 6 paramitas. Total generosity, ceaseless goodness, goodness is the precepts, morality, selfless patience, utter commitment, all-embracing meditation, and all-penetrating insight. The Bodhisattva considers as well the astonishing energy generated by their limitlessly powerful Buddha qualities after they reach the goal, including their adamantine courage and confidence, their sublime and miraculous ways of knowing, their infinite comprehension and tender sympathy for the minds and hearts of all beings, and their vow to sacrifice themselves for the smallest act of service, as well as for the liberation and enlightenment of every conscious being. The meditator visualizes the shining treasury of transferable merit generated by these Buddhas in all world systems through their awakening into omniscience, joined with tender solicitude toward all beings and the other immeasurable and incalculable characteristics of Buddhahood. Gazing intently in visionary contemplation upon these awakened ones of past and present eons, the meditator considers their realizing and giving of the most radical teaching, that Buddha nature is fully evident and openly expressed through all the structures of relativity without exception. Before the intuitive vision of the Bodhisattva now appears all the turnings of the wheel of this revolutionary teaching of Dharma, all the victorious efforts to carry the brilliant torch of Dharma, to beat the thunderous drum of Dharma, to fill with timeless nectar the auspicious white conch shell of Dharma, to wield the non-violent sword of Dharma. The illumined meditator clearly witnesses the careers of all Buddhas as the spontaneous pouring down of the rain of the Dharma, and the refreshment of all living beings with the subtly appropriate nourishment of Dharma, presented directly to them as the purest gift, their own true nature. The meditative scope is once again expanded, this time to include the merit dedicated to universal conscious enlightenment, which was and is being generated by the excellent practitioners in the Fourfold Assembly surrounding every ancient and contemporary Buddha. The radiant and joyful assembly that consists of monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, surrounded by various heavenly and subtle beings. He's making the point that this is going on right now. okay? And each of us is a bodhisattva, lowercase b. When we set our minds upon doing something about ourselves and on the grandest scale, realizing Buddhahood, knowing our own true nature. Finally, the bodhisattva contemplates with the greatest intensity of sympathetic joy and gratitude every single seed of goodness planted during beginningless eons in all world systems, on every planet where Buddhas or emanations of Buddhas have demonstrated truth and entered into final nirvana. And then he goes on and say this is also realized by beings in all realms, even including the animal realm. At the culmination of this ecstatic meditation, with vastly expanded and reconsecrated mind and heart, the Bodhisattva gives thanks for the supreme teaching of reality. This is reality with a capital R. Gives thanks to the fourfold communities that gather around every Buddha to assure the dissemination of this most precious teaching. Gives thanks to all conscious beings, or even to the slightest degree cultivating goodness by training their minds to be selflessly compassionate. At this summit, filled with the most sublime sense of jubilation and limitless gratitude, the Bodhisattva gathers and fuses into a single diamond all the goodness, meritorious energy, and bliss which has been visualized, contemplated, and directly experienced, not leaving out even the smallest good intention from the past, present, and future. Delicately, the Bodhisattva holds this inconceivable diamond in the center of awareness, rejoicing over it in the purest ecstasy of joy, a joy unapproached by any other joy, a rejoicing which is actually the incomparability of reality. Having celebrated thus in unthinkable, inconceivable delight, the Bodhisattva prays, I now offer and dedicate it to the eventual enlightenment of every conscious being, the boundless meritorious energy of this incomparable and measureless joy. And then just a reading from another chapter, which is called Pure Gratitude, Infinite Thankfulness. And that's come up a number of times already in the passage I just read, but we've got a whole chapter devoted to it. Lord Buddha, in this free and joyful atmosphere, the Wisdom Mother, Prajnaparamita, through the sublime body and speech and mind of the Buddhas, tenderly instructs bodhisattvas about the true nature of manifestation. Tathagatas live and move in the most intimate relationship with truth, and thereby understand thoroughly the transparent structures of relativity, which manifest spontaneously and without beginning. Buddhas are able to be all-knowing by not assuming finite or fixed positions. There's no fixed views. Buddhas are able to be all-knowing by not assuming finite or fixed positions within any cultural, philosophical, or religious system of knowledge. They abide in, through, and as perfect wisdom. They devotedly contemplate the spontaneously revealing goddess Prajnaparamita with deep consecration and respect, revering, worshiping, and ecstatically adoring her. For they know that truth, the openness and harmony of all structures of relativity, is none other than the Wisdom Mother. The omniscience which knows without finite cognition, and which alone constitutes Buddhahood, springs from Mother Prajnaparamita, and therefore all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are intensely grateful and thankful to her. They are, in fact, nothing but pure gratitude, infinite thankfulness, This gratitude takes the form of their constantly cherishing and embodying the Mahayana. Otherwise, we're doing the practice. We're doing the practice that of the large vehicle that takes everyone to the other shore, the Mahayana. The immeasurable vehicle upon which universal loving awareness is born. The contemplative practice by which heart and mind become fully illumined. The pure thankfulness of adamantine awareness takes the form of recognizing that the transparent structures of relativity has never brought it together and therefore never taken apart, has never created and therefore never destroyed. Through their selfless gratitude and thankfulness, the Wisdom Mother continues to instruct her enlightened children about the true nature of what is. We've got what is with capital letters. And the rest of the book has comparable flowery words about enlightenment. Again, it's very devotional in tone and flavor. And for me, at least, when I see this picture, of this statue of Prajnaparamita, I just immediately want to bow, because she's so beautiful, she's so inspiring. And as I said, specifically, she represents the scripture of great wisdom. She's actually in a lot of our liturgy, in almost an unseen way. Other lineages translate, or don't translate, the line in the three homages, which we use as the scripture of great wisdom. Homage to all the Buddhas in all worlds, homage to all the bodhisattvas in all worlds. And where we translate it out as the scripture of great wisdom, in a lot of lineages, they just say, Maha Prajnaparamita. The mother of all the Buddhas, just praise, Maha Prajnaparamita. So she's actually in every ceremony that we do. Okay? It's also the case, coming back to Manjusri, whose festival we did this morning, Manjusri often carries a lotus flower, and on that lotus flower is the scripture of great wisdom. If you look, there's it's a Chinese or Tibetan style book, with an accordion book. But if you look closely, you'll see that there's a book on that lotus flower, and that's the Prajnaparamita. So what I want to close with is, again, a reference to our current time with its challenges and difficulties. And I think what really comes through for me in this scripture is that line about the value of every single seed of goodness. Okay, there's no action that does not. There's just no good action that does not bear fruit. And we're all a part of this huge project, undertaking. We're all a part of this, and it's incredibly joyful. Even though we may be in the midst of difficulty, we can still be joyful. We can be great. We can be grateful. We can be thankful. We can look up when things look dark, or confusing, or fearful, and know this greater reality. There is an unborn, undying, unchanging, uncreated. And it's the universe enlightening itself. Okay? It's working for the good of all. So we're a part of something much bigger. And it's it's easy to lose sight of that when our difficulties seem so enormous. But we have to come back to that reference point that, as Reverend Master G put it, everything is happening for my good. Can we make good come out of this difficult situation and circumstances that we find ourselves in? I'll close with just a verse from our Shurangama litany. This is the closing verse. Yeah. Homage to the Tathagata, the successful one, the Arahant, the fully enlightened one who has completely realized the wisdom that is the path of the Divine Mother, Prajnaparamita. All hail. And that's your Dharma talk for today. Thank you.